When God begins to work in your life, one of the most noticeable and often painful experiences is the process of losing people, situations, or even comforts that once seemed integral to your existence. This isn't a random act or a punishment, it's intentional and purposeful. Growth requires change, and change demands space. To create room for the new, the old must be cleared away, much like a gardener pulling weeds to allow healthy plants to thrive. While this clearing process can feel isolating and confusing, it's one of the most significant ways God sets the stage for transformation. Imagine for a moment that your life is a piece of land. Over time, this land has accumulated various elements, some beautiful, some necessary, and some that simply don't belong anymore. Relationships, habits, and mindsets represent trees, rocks, and weeds that take up space in this land. To prepare this ground for a new purpose, God begins the process of clearing. It's not easy to see a tree you've grown attached to being uprooted or a familiar path being disrupted. But without this, the land cannot be transformed into what it is destined to become. The clearing process can feel deeply personal. You might find yourself asking, why is this happening to me? Why now? But what we often fail to realize is that many of the elements in our lives, including the people around us, are not permanent fixtures. Some relationships and situations are seasonal. They serve a purpose for a time, but are not meant to last forever. God, in His wisdom, sees the big picture. He knows which relationships are nourishing your growth and which ones are stunting it. When He removes someone's path, it's not just about removing negative influences or toxic relationships. Sometimes it involves letting go of people and situations that are good but no longer aligned with your purpose. This is one of the hardest parts of the process because it forces you to release your attachment to comfort and familiarity. Growth often requires discomfort. It demands that you step out of what is known and embrace uncertainty. In doing so, you open yourself to greater possibilities. This process also reveals what and who you've been relying on. Many of us unknowingly place our sense of security and identity in the people around us. We depend on them to validate us, to support us, and to make us feel whole. But when God begins to clear the path, He often removes those crutches, not to leave you helpless, but to teach you where your true strength lies. It's in these moments of loss that you discover the depth of your faith and resilience. You realize that your identity is not tied to anyone or anything external. It's rooted in who you are as a creation of God. While this pruning can feel like an act of destruction, it's actually an act of creation. God is not just removing what doesn't belong, He's making space for what does. It's like preparing a canvas for a new masterpiece. The old paint must be stripped away, and the surface must be smoothed out before the artist can begin. Similarly, your life must undergo this preparation before God can move you into the next phase. If you hold on tightly to what He's trying to remove, you risk missing out on what He's trying to bring into your life. The process also teaches you to trust. It's human nature to resist change, to cling to what feels safe and familiar, even when it no longer serves us. But faith requires surrender. It requires believing that the clearing is not an end, but a beginning. It's a statement of trust in God's greater plan, even when you can't see the full picture. In letting go, you create the space for divine intervention, for miracles to unfold in ways you could never have imagined. What's most powerful about this clearing is that it prepares you for the next level of your journey. Just as a rocket sheds parts as it ascends, you must release what weighs you down to rise higher. The people and situations God removes are not meant to go where you're going. They fulfilled their purpose in your life, and it's time for you to step into something greater. This doesn't diminish the value of what you've lost. Instead, it honors the role it played in getting you to this point. But now God is calling you to move forward, to grow beyond what you once thought possible. When you embrace this process, you'll begin to see the beauty in it. The empty spaces in your life are not voids, they are opportunities. They are areas where new relationships, ideas, and blessings can take root. The clearing is not just about removing, it's about preparing. And when God prepares something, it is always for something extraordinary. As we journey through life, it's common to encounter moments when we find ourselves surrounded by people who were once crucial to our story, but no longer fit the narrative of where we are headed. These individuals may have been with us through many chapters, offering comfort, companionship, and support. But as life progresses, certain relationships simply cannot go with us to the next level. This is a difficult truth to accept, especially when it feels like we are losing something or someone important. Yet this is precisely why God sometimes removes people from our lives before He moves us forward. Not everyone in our lives is meant to stay forever. Some relationships are seasonal, serving a specific purpose for a limited period of time. At first, it's easy to see why certain people are brought into our lives. They teach us valuable lessons, help us grow, or provide companionship during times of need. These relationships feel essential because they serve immediate needs, and we come to rely on them for stability and emotional fulfillment. However, there comes a time in our journey when God begins to reveal that those people, though significant in their season, are no longer aligned with the person we are becoming or the path we are walking. The process of being separated from these people can feel like a deep personal loss, especially if they've been part of our lives for years. It's natural to ask, why are these relationships ending? Or why is this person being taken from my life? The answer lies in understanding that growth often requires us to leave behind what's comfortable. Just as a tree must shed its leaves to survive the harsh winter and make room for new growth, we must sometimes let go of people, no matter how cherished, to make room for the new season God is bringing into our lives. When God is preparing to move us to the next level, He often does so by removing the distractions and attachments that could weigh us down or hold us back. The people we hold closest to our hearts might no longer serve our greater purpose. While it's painful to acknowledge, it's important to realize that these separations are not signs of failure or betrayal. They are an essential part of the divine process. The people in your life who can't accompany you into your future aren't necessarily bad or wrong. They simply are not equipped to go where you're going. This idea can be difficult to grasp, particularly when the people being removed from your life are not toxic, but are instead people you love and care for deeply. The truth is, their role in your life has been fulfilled, and it's now time for you to step into new connections and experiences that are more in alignment with your next phase of growth. The relationships that are meant for the future will come at the right time, and they will provide the support, understanding, and partnership necessary for your journey ahead. This doesn't diminish the importance of those who were there for you in the past. It simply means that your story is evolving, and not everyone can keep up with the pace of that evolution. The idea of leaving behind relationships can also reveal how much we rely on others for our sense of self. It's easy to define ourselves based on the people we associate with, the groups we belong to, or the roles we play in others' lives. But when God removes certain people from our lives, it forces us to look inward and redefine who we are without the validation or approval of others. This can be an uncomfortable process, but it's also incredibly empowering. It's an opportunity to strengthen your sense of identity in Christ and to realize that your worth doesn't depend on the people around you. Your worth is intrinsic and unshakable, found in your relationship with God and your purpose in His plan. As painful as it might feel, losing people from your life is often a sign of divine growth. It's a sign that God is preparing you for something greater, something more suited to the person you are becoming. When we cling too tightly to relationships, even those that are well-meaning or seemingly beneficial, we might miss out on the future that God has in store for us. Growth requires change, and change often demands letting go of what no longer fits into the picture. God's plan is always about elevation, about moving us to higher ground. But not everyone is capable of walking that higher path with us. The people you've relied on for comfort, the friends you've shared countless memories with, and even the family members who have been there for you in tough times may not have the capacity to grow in the same direction that you are. This doesn't make them any less important in your life, but it does make their absence a necessary part of your personal journey. It's through the act of removing these connections that God opens the door for new, more aligned relationships to form. In this process, it's crucial to trust that God's timing is perfect. The relationships he removes are not meant to cause harm, but are instead part of the bigger picture of your life's purpose. By allowing these people to leave, God makes room for the new, the better, and the more aligned with your future. The process of shedding these relationships may be difficult, but trust that God is clearing the path for something far more magnificent than you can imagine. When God begins to work in our lives, one of the most profound ways he prepares us for his plan is by making space for new opportunities, relationships, and blessings. This often happens when he removes people or circumstances that no longer serve our growth, clearing a path for what is truly meant for us. It is important to understand that these removals are not arbitrary, they are intentional acts of divine love. God is not taking away what is good, rather, he is making room for something better, something that is more aligned with his greater purpose for us. This divine clearing is a form of preparation for the bigger blessings that God has in store. God works in mysterious ways, and often we don't realize the full extent of his plan until much later. The relationships, opportunities, and comforts that were once fulfilling can begin to feel like weight, holding us back rather than propelling us forward. It is during these times that God, in his wisdom, starts to remove those elements from our lives. This process can be painful, as it feels like we are losing something valuable, something that once brought us joy, security, or identity. But the truth is, these things are not permanent fixtures in our lives. God's purpose is always to move us towards something more significant, and this often requires clearing the old to make way for the new. The process of making space for new blessings begins with the understanding that what is removed isn't necessarily bad, it's just no longer the best fit for where we're going. God sees the bigger picture. He knows where we are headed, even when we can't see beyond the moment. His plan is not just for today, but for the long term. And sometimes we have to trust that what we're letting go of is nothing compared to what he is bringing. The removal of what's comfortable or familiar creates room for new experiences, new relationships, and new ways of thinking, things that we may not have even imagined. In many ways, this process is like preparing a plot of land for planting. If the soil is filled with rocks, weeds, or other obstacles, it can't support healthy growth. Similarly, if our lives are filled with outdated or misaligned relationships, unhealthy attachments, or unproductive habits, it's difficult for us to grow into the person God created us to be. In these moments, God acts as the gardener, removing what needs to go so that new seeds, new blessings, and opportunities can take root and flourish. By removing the clutter, he ensures that we have the necessary space and resources to thrive. Sometimes this removal involves not just people, but situations, jobs, or environments that were once familiar but are no longer in line with our purpose. These situations may have once seemed like the perfect fit, providing security and comfort. However, as we grow, our needs and desires shift. God knows what we need to fulfill our potential, and he will take steps to ensure that we don't settle for less than what he has intended for us. This may mean removing us from a job that doesn't challenge us, a community that doesn't encourage our growth, or even a home that doesn't align with the next phase of our journey. In every case, he is clearing the path for something greater. It's also important to realize that this process doesn't happen overnight. Just as a gardener must carefully and thoughtfully remove weeds and tend to the soil, God's work in our lives is gradual. He knows when we are ready for the next step, and he makes sure that we are equipped to handle the new blessings that come our way. During this time of transition, we may not understand why things are happening the way they are, and it can be tempting to resist the changes. But the key is to trust that God's timing is perfect, and that the blessings he is preparing for us are worth the waiting and the pruning. Another vital aspect of this process is that God doesn't just remove what no longer serves us, he replaces it with what is better. The space that is created in our lives is not meant to stay empty. When God removes something, he is making room for something more in line with his vision for our lives. This is why it's important to let go of what is being taken away. If we cling too tightly to what is gone, we miss the opportunity to receive the better thing that God has planned. It is in letting go that we create space for the new to enter, and we have to trust that God knows what is best for us. The new opportunities, relationships, and blessings that God brings into our lives are often beyond our imagination. When we are in the midst of change, it can be difficult to see beyond the immediate loss. However, as time passes and the new blessings unfold, we begin to understand why God made space for them. The relationships that come into our lives after the clearing are often deeper, more aligned with our purpose, and more fulfilling than those that have been removed. The new opportunities provide greater growth and alignment with our divine calling. What God removes, He replaces with something that will take us further along the path He has set before us. Through this process, we learn to trust God more deeply. We learn that His plans are always better than our own, and that He is always working behind the scenes to prepare us for a future that is far greater than anything we could have imagined. By making space for new blessings, God is not just clearing the path, He is preparing us for the extraordinary future that awaits. When we go through the process of losing people or situations from our lives, one of the most significant lessons we learn is that isolation can be a form of preparation. While many of us may fear being alone, the truth is that solitude often precedes growth, transformation, and elevation. In fact, some of the most important moments in our spiritual and personal journeys occur when we find ourselves in times of isolation. These periods of solitude are not meant to punish us, but rather to prepare us for the new chapter God is about to unfold. At first, being left alone or distanced from familiar relationships can feel like an overwhelming burden. It's easy to feel abandoned, misunderstood, or even forsaken. But what if, instead of seeing this time of separation as a negative experience, we reframed it as an opportunity to deepen our connection with God and to reflect on our true calling? In many ways, these moments of isolation are God's way of drawing us closer to Himself. When the noise of the world quiets down and the distractions of daily life fade, we are left with only ourselves and our Creator. This space allows us to hear God's voice more clearly and to understand His direction for our lives. Solitude teaches us to rely on God in a way that is not possible when we are surrounded by people or circumstances that provide comfort and stability. When we're constantly in the presence of others, we can sometimes rely on their opinions, validation, and support, rather than seeking God's guidance. During times of isolation, we are forced to turn inward and upward, seeking God for strength, direction, and clarity. It's in these moments that we begin to truly understand that God is our ultimate source of comfort, peace, and purpose. While human relationships are valuable, they are not meant to replace our relationship with the divine. God uses periods of solitude to remind us of this truth and to encourage us to grow in our dependence on Him. Moreover, isolation helps us to reflect on our own personal journey. When we are constantly surrounded by others, it can be difficult to see ourselves clearly. We may begin to define ourselves based on the roles we play in others' lives, whether as a partner, a parent, a friend, or a colleague, without fully understanding who we are outside of those labels. In moments of solitude, we are given the chance to reflect on our own identity and purpose. We can ask ourselves questions like, who am I beyond the titles I hold? What is my true calling? What does God want me to do in this season of my life? This self-reflection is an essential part of spiritual and personal growth. It allows us to rediscover our true selves and align our actions with God's will. Another important aspect of isolation is that it creates space for healing. Sometimes we hold on to old wounds, hurts, and past experiences that prevent us from moving forward. We may try to bury these wounds beneath the surface, but they still affect us in ways we may not realize. During times of solitude, God can begin the process of healing. The quiet and solitude give us the opportunity to process our emotions, confront past pain, and allow God to heal us from the inside out. It's in these moments of quiet reflection that we are able to face our deepest hurts and surrender them to God, trusting that He can restore us and make us whole. In addition to healing, isolation allows for spiritual growth. When we are alone with God, we are able to spend time in prayer, meditation, and reflection without distractions. We can deepen our relationship with God and gain a clearer understanding of His purpose for our lives. This time alone is an opportunity for us to strengthen our faith, to study Scripture, and to draw closer to God in a more intimate way. It's through this deepening connection with God that we find the strength and clarity we need to move forward in our lives. Furthermore, isolation helps us to develop resilience and independence. We learn that we do not need the approval or presence of others to be whole and complete. Our strength comes from God, and He equips us to face challenges, uncertainties, and changes on our own. As we navigate through times of isolation, we develop a deeper sense of self-confidence and resilience. We begin to trust in our own abilities and in God's provision, knowing that we are capable of facing whatever comes our way. This inner strength is crucial as we move into the next phase of our journey, because it allows us to face future challenges with greater courage and faith. God often uses periods of isolation to prepare us for new opportunities. During these times, He may be working behind the scenes, orchestrating the circumstances that will lead us to the next chapter of our lives. While we may not always understand what God is doing during these times, we can trust that He is preparing us for something greater. Isolation can serve as a time of preparation, where God is refining us, building our character, and strengthening our faith so that we are ready for the blessings He has in store for us. In the end, isolation is not a punishment. It is a form of preparation. It is in the quiet and solitude that God works deeply within us, drawing us closer to Himself, healing us, and equipping us for what lies ahead. When we embrace these periods of solitude, we open ourselves to the transformative power of God's presence in our lives. Instead of fearing isolation, we can learn to see it as a sacred time of growth, reflection, and preparation for the great things that God has prepared for us in the future. Letting go of people and situations that no longer serve us is often a painful yet transformative process. The feelings of loss, grief, and uncertainty can make it feel like we're being abandoned, even though we know deep down that what we're holding on to is no longer meant for us. This process of shedding attachments can bring up emotions that are difficult to navigate, yet it is a necessary step in the journey of personal and spiritual growth. The pain that accompanies letting go is not something to avoid, but something to embrace, as it is through this very discomfort that transformation takes place. When we hold on to something or someone that is no longer meant to be part of our lives, we keep ourselves tethered to the past. This attachment, even if it no longer serves us, can create a sense of security. It feels familiar, and familiarity provides comfort, even when the relationship or situation is not aligned with our future. These attachments are often deeply ingrained in our identity, and the thought of releasing them can trigger fear and resistance. We fear that we won't be able to move on, or that we won't find something better. But this fear is a natural part of the process, and it's important to understand that it doesn't diminish the value of the things or people we must let go of. It's simply an indication that we are about to experience significant growth. The truth is, the pain we feel when letting go of what's familiar is often a sign that God is preparing us for something greater. Just as a tree must lose its leaves in the fall to survive the winter and prepare for new growth in the spring, we too must shed old attachments to make room for what's next. We can't carry the weight of the past with us into the future without being weighed down. There's a certain freedom that comes with releasing what's no longer necessary, and it is in this freedom that we find new opportunities and possibilities for growth. Though the process of letting go can feel like a loss, it's actually a gain, because it clears the way for new blessings to come into our lives. While the pain of letting go is real, it is also temporary. Often we fear the pain more than the loss itself, imagining it will last forever. However, in reality, the pain gradually fades as we adjust to the changes and embrace the new reality that comes with them. We are resilient beings, and the human capacity to heal and move forward is immense. As we move through the initial pain, we begin to see the purpose behind the loss, recognizing that it was necessary for us to grow, evolve, and step into our true potential. The act of letting go allows us to make space for things that are more aligned with our future, things that will encourage us, challenge us, and help us become the people we are meant to be. In many ways, the pain of letting go serves as a catalyst for healing. Holding on to things that no longer serve us often prevents us from healing fully. When we are constantly looking back, trying to hold on to what's been lost, we prevent ourselves from fully embracing the present moment and all that it has to offer. Letting go allows us to stop looking over our shoulder and instead focus on the future with hope and anticipation. It opens the door for new experiences, new people, and new blessings to enter our lives. The act of releasing frees us from the emotional baggage that has held us back, allowing us to step forward with a lighter heart. Letting go also helps us clarify our true desires and needs. When we're attached to something, it can be difficult to see what we truly want, because we're so focused on what we're holding on to. But when we let go, we create the space to discover what aligns with our true purpose. It becomes easier to identify the relationships, opportunities, and environments that will nurture our growth. The process of letting go brings clarity to our desires, helping us to better understand what we need to move forward and thrive. Through this clarity, we are able to attract the things that are truly meant for us, rather than holding on to what was never intended to be permanent. In addition, letting go teaches us the importance of trust. Trusting in the process of life and in God's plan is an essential part of the journey. It requires us to let go of our need for control and to believe that something better awaits us. When we trust God, we surrender our fear and anxiety about the unknown, knowing that He will provide for us. This trust is not always easy to maintain, but it is a crucial part of the letting go process. It allows us to release our grip on what we can no longer control and to embrace the future with open hands, ready to receive the blessings that God has in store for us. Ultimately, letting go is not about forgetting or disregarding the importance of the people or experiences we are leaving behind. It's about acknowledging that they served a purpose in our lives and that it's time to move forward. The pain we feel is not a sign of failure, but a sign of our growth. We are being called to something greater, something that will help us fulfill our true potential. As we release what no longer serves us, we open ourselves to new possibilities, new relationships, and new experiences that will help us grow even further. The process of letting go is not just about what we are losing, but about what we are making space for a life filled with new opportunities, greater purpose, and deeper joy. Sometimes the process of moving forward requires a complete transformation of our environment, the people around us, and even our own inner world. When God removes people from our lives, it may feel as though we are being cut off from something essential to our happiness or identity. However, this removal is often a necessary part of the process that allows us to reach our true potential. It's easy to see this act as something painful or unfair, but with the right perspective, we can begin to understand that it is, in fact, an act of love and care from a higher source. God is not taking away what is good, He is making space for something greater. In times of transition, the relationships and circumstances we hold dear are sometimes cleared away so that we can make room for the new experiences and people who will guide us to our next level of growth. The people we surround ourselves with have a profound impact on who we are and who we become. Our environment influences our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. As we move through life, we sometimes outgrow the relationships that were once important to us, or we find that the people we once trusted no longer align with the direction we are heading. When this happens, it can be a deeply unsettling experience. These people may have been sources of comfort, support, or companionship, and the thought of losing them can stir feelings of fear and loss. However, the reality is that not everyone we encounter is meant to walk with us through every stage of our lives. The truth is, many people are only meant to accompany us for a specific time or purpose. Once that purpose is fulfilled, God allows these connections to shift so that we can move forward without hindrance. In some cases, these relationships may be emotionally draining or prevent us from becoming the best version of ourselves. While they may have served a purpose in our past, they can become anchors, holding us back from the progress we need to make. These relationships may bring negativity, stagnation, or distractions that impede our growth. By removing such individuals from our lives, God is giving us the opportunity to step into a space where we can fully focus on our own development and journey toward fulfillment. It's not about abandoning people, but rather about creating the freedom to grow independently and become the person we are destined to be. Additionally, God's act of removing people from our lives can be a way of protecting us from toxic or harmful influences. Often we may hold on to relationships that are not good for us because we fear loneliness or the pain of confrontation. These toxic relationships can be draining, manipulative, or even abusive, and they can prevent us from living our lives with peace, joy, and purpose. God's removal of these people from our lives, while it may seem like a loss at first, is ultimately an act of love and protection. He knows that for us to thrive, we need to be surrounded by individuals who uplift, encourage, and support us, not those who drag us down or hold us back from our higher calling. The relationships we form with others can also shape our sense of self-worth and identity. When we are surrounded by people who are supportive and encouraging, we are more likely to believe in our potential and pursue our dreams with confidence. However, when we are surrounded by people who constantly undermine us, belittle us, or make us doubt ourselves, it can be difficult to recognize our true worth. In some cases, we may become so attached to these relationships that we lose sight of who we really are. When God removes these people from our lives, it is a reminder that our worth is not defined by others' opinions of us. Instead, our worth is found in the love and purpose that God has placed within us. Letting go of relationships is not just about removing people who are harmful or unsupportive, it's also about creating space for the right relationships to come into our lives. God does not leave us in isolation. He fills the space left by those who have been removed with new connections that will nurture our growth. The people who come into our lives after a period of separation or loss often bring fresh perspectives, encouragement, and insight that can guide us toward our next chapter. These new relationships can be a source of healing, empowerment, and inspiration. They can help us to grow in ways that we may not have been able to with the old connections that were holding us back. It's important to remember that the relationships that God has planned for us are often better suited for the person we are becoming, not the person we once were. This process of removal and replacement can also serve as a spiritual awakening. It can prompt us to reevaluate our priorities, to refocus on our own goals, and to deepen our relationship with God. Sometimes we become so focused on the people around us that we neglect our own spiritual needs. When people are removed from our lives, we are given the opportunity to turn inward and focus on our relationship with God. This can be a time of spiritual growth, prayer, and reflection that strengthens our foundation and prepares us for the next steps in our journey. Through it all, the key is to trust in God's wisdom and timing. While the removal of people from our lives may be painful, we can take comfort in knowing that God is working for our good. He is not removing these people to harm us or punish us, but to clear the path for something greater. The people who are meant to stay in our lives will remain, and the people who are meant to leave will make way for the new relationships that will help us grow, thrive, and fulfill our purpose. It's a reminder that everything in our lives is part of God's greater plan, a plan that is always for our benefit, even when we don't fully understand it in the moment. In the end, while it may be difficult to say goodbye to people or situations that have been part of our journey, we can find peace in knowing that this removal is part of our transformation. God's plan for us is always about progress, growth, and elevation. When we trust Him with our relationships and allow Him to clear the way for what's next, we create the space for the beautiful new beginnings that are waiting for us.